One goal of this event is for more people to become aware of the work and thought of Albert Murray. His book, The Omni-Americans, has been quoted from and referred to very often. It's in the very subtitle of our event. But in other books, Murray provided even more insight into his philosophy of life and culture. Our next segment will feature Rabbi Daniel Bouskila and author and leadership coach Nick Jankel in conversation about Albert Murray's The Hero and the Blues.
Rabbi Bouskila, take it away.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting this really important conference. And I'm thrilled to have been introduced and brought into the world of Albert Murray by my friend Aryeh Tepper. Albert Murray's works are transformative and meaningful, a lot of depth. And Aryeh asked me to read The Hero and the Blues, a short but very insightful work, which I felt very connected to, and I feel very connected to. I felt that it was, in a sense, self-validating and affirmed everything I believe about the power, the transformative power of literature, of what some may call fiction or historical fiction, narrative fiction, as more than just a mode of entertainment, but actually the primary form of art that could really help us connect and deeply understand the human experience, more so in the constricting fashions of some of the social sciences, philosophy, sociology, and so on. And I say self-validating and self-affirming because in my own spiritual / professional work, as a rabbi, as a teacher, as a spiritual leader of different communities here in the United States and around the world, I actually use literature as a primary form of teaching Judaism. On a weekly basis, I teach the literature of the Nobel Prize winning author Shai Agnon, who won the Nobel Prize in 1966. I have a weekly 2-hour class with close to 30 students on Zoom about Agnon's literature as a way of understanding Judaism and the Jewish experience. More so than the Talmud, more so than the Bible itself, I feel that Agnon is a frame of reference, his literature, for what it means to be Jewish. Rabbi Chaim Sabato, who is a rabbi, a Talmudic scholar, and a celebrated author in contemporary Israel today, is the way I teach Sephardic Judaism to many of my audiences in the Sephardic Educational Center around the world. So for me, when Murray speaks about literature as being the primary way we express ourselves and understand the human experience and how transformative it can be, that spoke very deeply to me.
Nick, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Daniel. That was very moving. So to speak to your thoughts, I was given the book by Greg Thomas, a new friend, but a dear friend and collaborator. And I also spoke to me very profoundly and very personally. I felt my heart open and my mind connect. My everyday work is in helping leaders and change agents make the very difficult journey of self-transformation and world transformation, particularly ensuring that organizations are purposeful, sustainable, just, respectful, life-affirming. And I passionately believe that transformation of this type needs not just analysis, criticism, cultural theory, philosophizing, data-based evidence, what Murray calls social science and its most monstrous form, the social science fiction monster, the protest literature. But it needs intuition, improvisation, invention, which, as we know, is at the core of narrative, whether in novels, literary forms, or Netflix, equally literary these days, and very much speaks to me and my generation. And this connects brilliantly with the neurological updates we're getting from neurobiology, that we actually seem to have two distinct modes of consciousness. One which is analytical and convergent, which is what we think the serious stuff is all about, changing the world. But the other is actually connective, insightful, empathic, and imaginative. And I strongly believe that if we're in the former mode of consciousness, when we are being taught serious, significant stuff, we actually are unable to co-create and make change happen. And in summary, we need more epic and less engineering with our change making. And that's very much, I think, what the literary mode allows us to do.
Fascinating. Rabbi Bouskila, would you like to respond to Nick's comments?
Yeah, I think, just as a form of affirming again, I think what Nick said when he talked about the power of literature, and that includes even, Netflix in today's generation, meaning the narrative form of art, I think has really the transformative ability to allow us to understand the human experience. And if indeed this entire conference, as it's titled, Combating Racism and Anti-Semitism, racism and anti-Semitism emerge from the human experience. And the more we engage in racism and anti-Semitism and combating them in abstract forms, perhaps it removes us from it. It becomes nothing more than an interesting conversation. How do we take the world of combating racism and anti-Semitism and personalize it, humanize it? Only when we relate to human characters, whether they jump out to us from a page or from a screen on Netflix, then it becomes alive, then it becomes real, when we're able to have the improvisation that fiction allows us to see within characters, the flexibility, the imagination. That's sometimes what some of the social sciences severely lack. And while they sound attractive as modes of explaining what the problems are, they haven't really done a great job in helping us solve the problems. And I love the fact that Nick brought in Netflix, because it's not only about reading. I love reading, but it's about watching and experiencing. And I think that's what Murray's book is, an experience in and of itself. Reading it, it jumped out at the page musically per its topic.
Yeah, I mean,
Bon, go ahead.
It's touching into the blues idiom and the musical piece of his writing. So I had a personal transformation in jazz, in the experience of dancing with my body, not with my mind. I'd always been very intellectual, but on a dance floor with syncopated rhythms, with breakbeats, which move your body in a way that your mind doesn't even know what's going on. And I could feel that energy in Murray's writing and other bits of writing I've read of his, and that out of the chaos of the potentiality of jazz comes form, or in dance, shapes get made out of what's seemingly chaotic and disordered and problematic. And so when I read this, and my work fundamentally focuses on what Murray calls the blues, the heroic endowment, the ultimate expression of humanity, which is to improvise with life in its most absurd and agonizing and angst-ridden form, to make it into art, to make life as art out of whatever you are dealt with, the pain and the suffering. This is the quintessential heroic journey. And what Murray added or beautifully and brilliantly deepened was how to make it cool as well, to stylize the heroic journey. It's not just about Star Wars. It's not just about the suffering and the dragon and the sword. You can be damn cool as you're going through life, stylistically engaging in this transformation of suffering into strength, of tragedy into triumph, personal triumph, and maybe triumph beyond that. And the fact that from humiliation comes purification, and this way of being able to dance in that. It was just beautiful. As a student of the heroic, as a teacher of the heroic, because I believe the heroic is the sort of quintessential human experience, to take whatever you have, and as improvisation theory says, you say yes to it, accept it as it is. I think this idea of the low down dirty shame, which I remember sharing with Greg immediately when I read it, and I was like, that is it, right? That's at the core also of my own personal Jewish experience, and as a child of Holocaust survivors, as a child of Kindertransport survivors, this fact that it is a low down, you can't read or experience Holocaust literature, Holocaust writing without experiencing that degradation of the human experience down to the lowest point, as you do from understanding the experience of slavery in the US.
Absolutely.
And then to work with it and find something to play, the playfulness of it, as well as the profundity. And it's super practical as well. You know, there's nothing unpractical about this work. This is a work of super practical life tools.
Literature is equipment for living, absolutely. So,
and yeah, I was just going to say that you're just emphasizing how powerful creativity can be. Rabbi, I want to throw it to you and ask you if you have any closing words after this really interesting discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Nick pointed out the personal reaction. So in the beginning, I gave sort of a professional personal reaction, but I wanted to bring in a personal reaction in terms of the themes that are being brought up here. And I think it's super significant that this conference is being jump-started and sponsored or co-sponsored by an organization called the American Sephardi Federation. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, anybody who grew up an American Sephardi Jew, like myself, a child, a first-generation American, a child of immigrants that came from North Africa, Morocco, and Algeria. I grew up in a home speaking Arabic and French. Those are my native languages. That's the culture we had at home. And at the same time, being an American, clearly in the United States, the type of Judaism that I celebrated in my home was considered a subculture of American Judaism. American Judaism is Ashkenormative. And Murray would argue that the blues theme that really belongs in American culture and is intimately part of American culture, for me, the notes that played in my mind is that the improvisational element of praying to joyous tunes on Yom Kippur, when the cantor is not following musical notes, but he's following something called the makam. The makam in music is a genre where he has the right and he has the privilege and he has indeed the responsibility and the expectation to riff, to improvise within the liturgy. That's the culture of the synagogues I grew up with. And Murray would argue that that culture should not be separate, distinct, and put off into a museum, but it is part and part of the Jewish American experience. If we're talking about Israel, it's part of the Israel Jewish experience. And that's what spoke to me so powerfully here. And I said, wow, suddenly I had kind of like, you know, a eureka moment. This is a conference sponsored by the American Sephardi Federation. I think Murray would really understand, as if we were to say there was an African-American organization that's sponsoring a conference on combating racism. It's really two of the sides of the same coin. And that's why I think Murray's literary imagination gives us a lot to think about when he says improvisation is the ultimate human endowment.
Right.
I so deeply connect to that.